Well, I'm screwing around in the shop today, even though I don't have a lot of time. But I just wanted to show really quickly. Um, I had shot this whole body with clear on the front and the back. I wet sanded the whole front with 1200. Now I'm working on the back, and I thought, well, you know what? If I'm doing this, I might as well show it on camera. So there's not much to the process. I've been using this little block. It's just a piece of wood. I cut it pretty flat, but the point is you don't want to use something like your fingers, because wherever your fingers are pushing down, that creates a like a divot in the sandpaper, or it sands more than the other spots of the sandpaper. So you want something that's going to distribute that evenly, and you want a lot of water, and you want really wet sandpaper. And I usually go in small circles, sometimes a little larger circles depending on the radius that I'm sanding. Like if I get in this belly area, I might do kind of longer strokes. And sometimes you can't avoid having to like get in on an edge a little bit. You got to be really careful when you're sanding right up next to an edge. I mean, obviously not on a tremolo cavity, because who cares, but like, when you're sanding on these edges that are in the middle of the paint job, it's real easy to burn through. So there's a ton of coats of clear on this. I think I mentioned that I painted the front in black lacquer. Then I did a sand job where I basically tried to blend in the new lacquer and the old poly on the side of the guitar, and I ended up with a pretty nasty line. It was just a visible line. It wasn't anything you could feel. But once I went back and reshot the whole thing with clear, that line went away. So I'm happy about that. And so basically what I've got here now is I've got black poly on the back covered in clear lacquer, and on the front I've got black lacquer covered in clear lacquer. So I'm sure that's not confusing at all, but anyway, it works. I got rid of most of the little damage spots here and there. It's not perfect. I didn't try to make it perfect. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the results. We'll see how it looks when I buff it, but so far so good. But anyway, that's the process. This takes forever. I don't think you want to watch the whole thing. But anyway, just wanted to let you know how it was done. 1200, by the way, is fine enough that, especially if I'm sanding between coats, I don't really have to sand a whole lot on this last coat. And it's fine enough that when I go to do my machine polish and buff, it'll take out all these little fine scratches. So you could even go finer if you want. I mean, I've seen people go 2,000, 3,000. You can make lacquer look like a mirror if you go crazy with it. But like, honestly, this is a $100 guitar on a good day, so I'm not gonna go crazy. Well, I've shown this before, but I usually use a drill and a small buffing wheel. The only thing I would note about buffing wheels is that the ones that you use for the beginning polishing compounds, the more aggressive compounds, are much stiffer than the ones that you use for like a finer polishing compound. So just something that I had to pick up over time. I don't know if I ever read that anywhere, but now you know. So anyway, just wet your pad. I've been buffing on this already. You can sort of see the difference in the two finishes, but it doesn't take long, and you don't have to do very many passes. You can move on to new grits. Just, when you finish polishing, give it a wipe down with a rag, take a look at the shine, see if you're happy with it, and then just move on. But it doesn't take very long. Also, you want to keep your pad moving, and you want to go as fast as you can on the drill without, splattering polishing compound everywhere. And when you start to go dry, just add more. So what I'm looking for when I'm looking at the shine is just to see that there's a consistent finish. It can be a little hazy, but just make sure that the finish is consistent, and that way you know you're ready to move on to the next grade. Be careful when you're going around your edges and your radiuses, because those can burn through faster if there's more pressure on the pad. Other than that, it's pretty simple. I gotta do the back and I'll flip it and do the sides. When I do the sides, I'm gonna use my conical pad. Well, I thought I'd do a little bit of reassembly now that everything's polished. So, back on with all the little hardware that I took off. I've done a lot of polishing on the chrome. Something I like to do on every single build is use new felts for the Strat buttons. So I'm going to install those first. Now I'm going to install the Tremolo. So we're going to start with the claw. On this guitar, it looks like the claw ground wire goes through the center of the tremolo cavity. I have no idea what the rule of thumb is on an Epiphone Strat in terms of how far to leave the tremolo claw out. I do know that the original tremolo springs are really rusty, and I got some new ones, and they're just a hair longer. So I'm going to use 4 of them instead of 5, or instead of 3 rather. And I'm thinking that the extra tension is going to be necessary, but we'll see. I was installing the tremolo and realized I need to clean up the original tremolo springs, and they're actually a little rusty, so I'm using a rust removal product on those. In the meantime, I've got one tremolo spring installed that's basically a new one, and I'm going to mount the neck. I did go ahead and re-drill the neck holes in the body. I drilled those out to 7/32 because they were at 3/16 and the screws were still binding in the body. So it's sort of a pet peeve of mine when that happens. And I just re-drilled. Now the neck's not fitting. Alright, well, I guess I'm going to have to do a little bit of sanding. I think that's because of my extra finish that's on there. Not too much, but just enough to impede progress. I've got to get some sandpaper. Alright, that's better. Alright, things are starting to look like a guitar again. I think I'm going to install a new jack. If you watched a few of my videos, you may have heard me talking about the output input jack, the 1/4" jack on a guitar, and sometimes I mention a switchcraft jack. This is a I guess a pretty typical jack you might find on an import guitar, and I just want to show you the difference between this thing and an actual switchcraft jack. I mean, first of all, the contact points are not even close. This one is so much beefier and has so much more contact area, and the connection points are equally different in size. So I can't stress enough, like, one of the more quality upgrades that you can make to an instrument is just installing this US made switchcraft jack, and it just holds up so much better over time. You'll just have, I mean, like, what can be more important to an electric guitar than the connection to your cable and amplifier? So, you know, this is like $1 or something. Like do the upgrade. It makes no sense not to. So when you're doing a jack installation on any guitar, you want your ground wire to go to the ring, and you want your your hot wire, I guess, to go to the tip. The ring is the tab that's connected to the literal ring on the bottom of this thing, and the tip connector is the one that's sandwiched in between these two insulators. And you can see the physical connection if you look at this whole thing from the side. I'm going to use this shielded cable that came with the Epiphone. It's actually not terrible. It's not a huge, I mean, it's not a large gauge wire, but it is a shielded wire, so I'm going to go ahead and reuse it. When I'm installing a jack into a Stratocaster jack plate, I always install it with the tip connector down. Honestly, I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but that's the way that provides me the most room, so that's why I do it like that. Just working on the tuners today. I took off on vacation and got myself sick, so I may not be doing a lot of talking this segment, but this is really straightforward. Nothing special. One thing I'll note about the nut, it was loose earlier, so I just put a couple of drops of super glue on the bottom of it, stuck it back on. You don't want to use a lot of glue on nuts because they need to be removed and replaced at some point in the guitar's life. We'll have my jack reinstalled, and I ran my wire through the body. I've got my tremolo ground wire run through the body, and I really didn't do much to the pick guard. I just repaired some of the shielding, tightened everything up, cleaned all the connections, and now I just need to reinstall. So I need to fix the ground wire to the back of the volume pot and the input jack to the center lug of the volume pot, and the ground wire on that to ground. So not too much there. Should be pretty quick. Okay, well that's the pick guard. I've got to leave the truss rod cover and the tremolo cover until last. When I was choosing my screws, all the screws for the pick guard and the truss rod cover and the back plate happened to all be the same, so I picked the 10 best that I had, used them for the pick guard. Other than that, nothing special going on here. I just need to do the tremolo springs next. For the tremolo springs, I used a solution called Evaporust and got the rust off of the springs. Where it was rusted, obviously it's now bare steel instead of chrome plated, but it looks a lot better than the rust itself. And I discovered that these trem springs have a much sharper angle on the hook end that goes into the bridge block itself than Fender Strat springs, and they're also a little bit shorter. So I'm going to try to reuse these and see how they work out. As a reminder, when you're installing these springs, don't be tempted to put them in a V. Try to put them straight if you can. Well, it's time for a set of strings. I've used the same strings pretty much my whole life. Just Ernie Ball Slinkies. Choose your own gauge, but I find that the hybrid suits a lot of different people. When I'm measuring where to start my wraps, I usually try to pull the string as tight as I can get it with my hands, and then measure over one tuner for each wrap that I want. So if I want 1 wrap, 2 wraps, 3 wraps, most of the time you're going to need at least 2 wraps, especially on the smaller strings, but it just depends on how much space you have in your tuner, or whether you have locking tuners. It can depend on a bunch of things. I'm going for 2 wraps on these on the bass side, and I'll probably shoot for 3 on the treble side. But anyway, that means that I would come over 2 tuners worth, back it up, and start my wraps from there. Alright, well that's not the prettiest work I've ever done because I was trying to do it backwards for you guys. Normally I'd have the guitar flipped around on the other side, so I'll get everything flipped back around, and I'll finish up this stringing process and show you the results. I've got my strings on now. I've got everything tuned to pitch. I think I'm going to cut the episode here just because there's a lot of setup to be done after you get to this point. So I'll be doing neck relief, pickup height, action. I'll be checking my nut height and just setting up the tremolo in the back. I can tell the tremolo springs are a little bit tight right now. The action feels pretty good, but I have to check my neck relief. So anyway, that's a lot for one episode, so I'll see you in the next one. Just a reminder, if you're watching these videos, please hit the subscribe button. It costs you nothing. All it's going to do is deliver more of these videos to your YouTube main screen. So please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button if you like my stuff, leave a comment if you feel like it. I really appreciate you guys watching, and thanks. See you in the next one.